Good morning, I'm Trevor Moore. I'm the Group Chief Operating Officer, and it's my responsibility to oversee the operation of all of our business brands.
Hi, my name is Ken Knott. I'm the Chief Development Officer, sat on the board responsible for assembling all of the sites required to develop out the company's brands and securing the necessary planning approvals.
Select Property Group was set up in 2004. At that point, our focus was very much around helping third-party developers to brand and to sell and to market off-plan property, which we did for people all over the world. We sold property to people in 120 different countries over a period of many years very successfully. But it was 2011 that we decided to make the break and develop and use the expertise that we had to become a developer as well as a seller and an operator of property. And we now have in our portfolio two operational brands. The first one arrived in 2013, Vita Student, where we started our first development in Liverpool, opening the following year in Manchester, Bristol, Exeter and Southampton. And we now have a big pipeline of property that we operate and will be developing out over the coming years. Our second brand, City Suites, opened most recently here in Manchester, and that's the first of what we hope will be many. Well, primarily here at Select Property, we are always focused on the end user. For us, it's really important to understand what the consumer wants from us, is expecting from the product, and to build a solution around that consumer. For us, we look at 50% of the equation being the building, and we take for granted the fact that we will have great locations, we will build outstanding quality assets, and they will have standout facilities. But beyond that, it's the service wrap that we put around that building that brings it alive and creates the exceptional experience that we're looking to deliver. So understanding truly what the customers want from us and building that solution and delivering it is critically important. The second aspect that I think makes us very different is the fact that we focus very hard on building communities. So we don't want stale buildings that people live in, we want communities that thrive, that people enjoy living in, that they make home and that they really bring those assets alive.
I think first and foremost, from an investment perspective, the city has had the benefit over the last 3 decades of a consistent political leadership and a consistent senior officer corps, and that team of people have gelled very, very well together with a single common objective, and that is to take the Manchester brand onto the international stage. And that consistency of leadership, the consistency of strategic ambition has created the conditions where the city is now certainly in the top 10 destinations globally for property investment, and that wasn't the case 30 years ago. It was a very different proposition. Well, when you have, it's almost ironic that democracy, which demands change every few years, is almost the reason why you don't get consistency of leadership and strategy. Because Manchester's, I think there are 97 members, of which 94 are Labour members. It's always had that huge majority. It's enabled Sir Richard Leese to be the leader for over 20 years, Sir Howard Bernstein, who came through the ranks from a junior clerk right up to the chief exec's role over a 35-year period. If you look at most great businesses globally, it's where they've had long-standing leadership with dynamic individuals who've had a very clear vision for the business. And actually, they've treated Manchester as a business. They've treated it as something which needs to be marketed and open for business. And before they got involved, it was perhaps left-wing leaning. It was pretty well closed for business. It was very nervous of the private sector. I think the single biggest thing they've done, though, is embrace partnership with the private sector, and you can see examples of that all over the city. All the major projects, the building we're sat in here is part of a 20-acre mixed-use development, which is a partnership between the City Council and a local developer, Ask, a business that I formed in 2000 and ran for 14 years. Spinningfields is a partnership between the City Council and Allied London. Piccadilly, a partnership between Argent and the City Council. So their fingerprints are all over these major projects that have fundamentally changed the physical presentation of the city, its cultural offer, its educational offer, its housing offer. When I started working here 30 years ago, nobody lived in the city. We now got over 20,000 inhabitants in the city. But I'm a developer through and through, and have been for 30 years. And the reason I joined Select, what excited me about them, is what Trevor was explaining earlier, and that is they are completely unique in the space of real estate, because they don't think bricks and mortar, they absolutely think people, and they identify an opportunity such as the private rented sector opportunity, but before they appoint a team to design a building or acquire a piece of land, 12 months is spent researching the customer profile that would go into the brand proposition that we're maturing. Research groups are held, focus groups. We really get underneath, or they, not me, but those parts of the business really get underneath the skin of who the customer is. Only at that point do we then begin to evolve a product to respond to that research base. And it's almost turning the development process on its head. It's going to the end first, working out what your customer wants, working out what community you want to create, and working backwards.
We have a huge pipeline of new opportunity coming to market here in Manchester over the next few years, starting with Vita Student, first of the 3 brands we're bringing to the city. We're in First Street now, which opened in 2014. But this year we'll be expanding our Vita Student residences into Circle Square, where we're opening 2 buildings and bringing online another 700 rooms this year. Our second brand, City Suites, opened this week. More than 240 luxury serviced apartments opened just at the end of Deansgate, and we're very excited to be concluding that project and bringing that building alive and starting to fill that with residents. And our third brand, Affinity Living, we have the most ambitious plans for in this city. We have 3 very exciting sites that will see more than 2,000 units of property come to market over the next 4 years. We have a development in Circle Square alongside Vita Student. We have a second site at Embankment just behind our City Suites development, and our third site on Riverside on River Irwell, adjacent to the Lowry, where we have 2 buildings coming on stream there too. Clearly Manchester's our home city. It's where our business is based and where we're from, and we have incredibly ambitious plans for Manchester, but our plans exist beyond Manchester into other leading cities across the UK. So we will see the Vita Student portfolio double in size this September as we open in Glasgow and York, and a second site in Newcastle, as well as the site I've already talked about in Manchester. And we have a pipeline of opportunity that we haven't announced all the detail of, but is secured and locked into our plan to be delivered over the next 3 years. In addition to that, we are developing sites for the other brands across the UK, but we've not as yet talked publicly about where they will be and how many units will come to market. In addition to that, Vita Student, we're also looking at international opportunity, and there are 2 territories we're very far advanced on in terms of our research and development. We hope to be able to talk to you about the opportunity we're going to be developing there in the near future.
As Trevor has explained, the scale of the portfolio we're maturing in the city, in excess of 2,000 units with an end value of over £750 million, must be, to my mind, one of the largest commitments of any business to the city. We're incredibly proud of our commitment to the city, and we want to showcase that internationally. As Trevor has explained, we're researching in 2 overseas jurisdictions. We're getting very excited about the opportunity to take each student out into those markets. You know, MIPIM is a global platform, so that's the perfect opportunity for us to meet leaders in those cities, to meet leaders and senior council officers from other cities in the UK where we want to take Affinity Living, we want to take City Suites, and we want to take Vita Student. So, and also the Manchester Partnership is relocating this year from its position above the entrance on the first floor in Cannes to what I think is a superb location adjoining the London stand, leveraging off the London footfall, which is one of the most popular exhibition stands in the whole of Cannes. So I think Manchester is really growing up this year. It's got a much bigger presence, and that's commensurate with its growth on the international stage. the ambitions are all about the business and the brands. But last year, by way of tangible example of the benefits of MIPIM, two of us went out, colleague Yanis Vidalis and myself. Yanis heads up our research and appraisal team. And he and I had dinner with two or three investing institutions, both of whom we're now in advanced negotiations with on a couple of very substantial projects. And those relationships started out in Cannes last year. And what you always find with MIPIM is you get the senior decision makers of most organisations in attendance. So it's a very rare opportunity to get in front of the key decision makers, to make your pitch, to make your proposition, and to then follow up when you get back to the UK, which is what we did after last year. So we've actually secured a great deal of additional sites for Vita Student and Affinity Living in the last 12 months. So we've got a lot more investors we want to talk to about developing those projects. I think we're moving towards a period of change. So Howard's retiring, it's his final MIPIM. Whilst at one level I think that there's a nervousness, understandably, on the part of the property community, that it's losing, its iconic leader, the visionary. I think, and hopefully Howard would agree with me if he was sat here, yes, he's been the figurehead, but he's got a superb team around him that he's worked with over a number of decades, as I remarked earlier. And all of that team are staying in place. So all of that team, I think, will continue with the legacy that Sir Howard's very ably put in place. So I don't think there'll be a deterioration in investment, in the activity within the real estate sector at all. And I think the maturity that we've seen in Manchester's position economically on the global stage means that it will be self-sustaining going forward. Perhaps very, very clear evidence of that is the international reach that is being demonstrated through the number of joint ventures that have been announced over the last couple of years, with particularly the Chinese companies. The Beijing Construction and Engineering Group partnering Manchester Airport on the development of Airport City, a 4.5 million square foot mixed-use project with over a projected value of over £1 billion and hopefully generating 2,000 to 3,000 jobs. We've also got Chinese investment in Liverpool through the Peel Holdings joint venture. I think one of the great strengths of Manchester in recent years has been the retained shareholding in the airport. And whilst that's a business that's driven by growing its profits, it also has a very sharp focus on growing the economic footplate for Manchester and the destinations that it's now secured access to, Beijing, Shanghai, all over the world. It doesn't bear any recognition to where we were 10 years ago. So the connectivity and the accessibility for people to get to us and for us to get to them has never been better. So not only is Manchester claiming all the things that we're saying, but there's now very hard and clear evidence that it's achieving that success. And I think the educational platform we have through the two great major institutions we have in the city are the clear reason why Vita Student is such a big success in this city. Most of our occupants are international students, Trevor?
They are. More than 80% of the people that live with us in Vita Student are international. And the very largest proportion of those in Manchester, more than 44% of people are Chinese.
So we know why that is, because the educational infrastructure is so is so impressive on a world stage that's what's attracting the investment. But what's even more impressive is the retention factor once those students have been through their educational process. Last year, for the first time, we've hit the criteria of 75% graduate retention. So all of those Chinese students, those very bright young things that are going to be the next generation of innovators and deliverers, are not choosing to go back home. A vast majority are choosing to stay here. And that tells you everything about what a great place it must be to live. They come from halfway across the world and they choose to stay. And we will be the beneficiaries of that, or should I say the next generations will be the beneficiaries of that, without doubt.
For me, there are three very clear drivers to the success of all property businesses, and it has to start, as it always has in our business, with the customer. The customer will dictate the success of businesses, and those businesses that are proactive and actively understanding, researching, developing their thinking, and evolving the understanding of what the customers are looking for in the future will be the leaders in our industry moving forward. And for too long, too many businesses have ignored the customer and done exactly what they wanted to do. But it's now time to really listen, learn and understand from the customer and build the solutions that the customer wants to see. Secondly, and evolving from the customer, is the creation of communities within buildings. Not hard, cold assets that stand alone and are managed as a facility, but buildings that come alive, buildings in which we enrich the lives of the people that live within them by creating communities and environments that people thrive in, that create memories, that people want to be part of and call home. And I think that that's going to be a key element moving forward for the success of property businesses. And finally for me, and just as important as the other two, is the development and adoption of technology. So the people who live with us are increasingly savvy when it comes to technology and are looking actively for solutions that make their lives easier, whether that be the ways in which we communicate with them, the ways in which we transact with them and contract with them, the ways in which they arrive in the building, and the ways in which we seek and gain and understand feedback. But technology plays an increasingly important part in our business every day, and we need to stay one step ahead of that curve and really understand what we can do to make the customers' lives happier and more successful as a result of adopting technology.